Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Alex Perez here with England Sports Center, and we're going to bring you a quick video on chatterbaits, trailers, what kind of trailers you can use on a chatterbait, because there is different kinds, and just a couple tips on chatterbaits. So, quick overview on chatterbaits. They're a pretty multi-purpose lure, specifically when you're fishing, snakeheads and bass. That's what pretty much everybody uses them for around this area, but you can catch multiple types of fish with that, with this lure. I mean, one of the biggest things why it became such a big popular lure throughout the whole fishing world is because it pretty much creates a lot of vibration and in some cases flash, so it's more in line than a spinner bait, but it does create a lot more vibration. So what that means is it's a good pretty much bait to cover water, meaning you can move around, cast this lure in different areas and just cover a lot of water. Now if the fish are really active, because of this vibration, it attracts them, especially when it's really muddy water conditions. That's when you're gonna have really good luck with this lure. Not saying that it won't work on actual clear water conditions, but it will pretty much work all around any kind of water condition you have. Now, if the fish are a little more finicky, you can get reaction baits by pretty much casting this lure along pieces of wood, rocks, any kind of structure, and dragging it across there, or just ripping it through there, and it will create a reaction bait just like a spinner bait. Now, there's all types of chatterbaits, different weights and whatnot, and the first thing I want to go over is pretty much the weights. Most of your chatterbaits are going to start at a 1/4 ounce, 3/8, half ounce, 3/4, 1 ounce, but there is manufacturers out there like Addiction Baits that make them a lot smaller, from 1/8, 3/16, and a lot smaller weights on the chatterbaits. Now, one thing you got to remember with these lures, because of that movement on the blade and that chatter, pretty much, sometimes if you go too light on the weight, it will actually plane up depending on the design of the lure. So a lot of times if you're fishing really shallow water, you can still go up to a little bit heavier weights, to a 1/4 ounce, 3/8. I personally find that for my fishing needs, personally, when I'm snakehead fishing and bass fishing, I tend to go to the 3/8 a lot, because I can fish that whole range between a foot of water to pretty much deeper conditions in 5, 6, even more, depending on how slow I reel it in and whatnot. But in those conditions, for example, you guys fish in black water, when you're fishing 6, 4 inches of water, you will get that use out of those 3/16, 1/8 of an ounce chatterbaits, especially because they'll stay up in the water column pretty high up, to the point where it's just below the surface, almost like a wake bait. And like I said, most of the time, if you're fishing at shallow, you're pretty much in the middle of that water column. If you're fishing, 6 to a foot of water, 6 inches to a foot of water, that bait's going to be right in the middle. So keep that in mind. Select those weights depending on how deep you're fishing. A lot of times you will find out that having multiple different weight sizes will help you out, especially if you go to another area where you're fishing 4 or 5 foot of water, and now that lighter weight's going to stay up too high out of that range. So now, with that saying, let's go to the trailers and the different trailers. Most people like to go with a paddle tail. You can actually use different sizes on the paddle tail. This is a regular standard 4-inch. You can go 5, 5.5 will be on the bigger side. I like to stay with the smaller size baits here, just because it fits most of your chatterbaits, and it actually fits most of your profile of baits, and you will catch a wide range of small fish, mid-sized fish, and bigger size fish. Now, one thing that the chatterbait has is that obviously that moves, so that blade will move, so that is doing all the movement there, all the work for you. So a lot of times when you put a paddle tail there, you also have to watch out how big that paddle tail is, because you don't want that movement working against the blade, because it would actually change the action and it would change the vibration on the blade. So we have here the diesel minnows. They're more of a tight wobble paddle tail, which won't really affect the actual movement on the blade. And there's two ways I like to rig this onto here. One way is just the regular way, which is pretty much grab your diesel minnow, get your hook right in the middle there on the hook, and make sure you get it out straight, push it up like that, and now you have a nice straight paddle tail on that. And the reason why that works so well, but it still wobbles. It won't work against the blade itself. Now, if you do notice that, because different brands work differently with chatterbaits, if you do notice that the blade's it's not chattering right or it's doing something weird, one thing I like to do, it's actually what I call rigging this upside down. So instead of coming out this back side where the fin is, you flip it, and then you're gonna come out the belly side. So same thing, go in there, push it up, but now you see the tail is upside down. And why does that make a difference? Because now this is flowing with the actual blade, and it actually kicks less, so it's more going with the flow of the blade, and in some cases it will actually help the bait stay down because it's not working against it so much. So that's one way I like to rig that up. If you know it makes a little bit of a difference on the blade, or just to try it, because a lot of times I like to try it both ways. If I want that heavier wobble on the tail, I'll flip it. If I want more of the chatter, I will actually flip it upside down. So that's one way to rig that, and that's one of the trailers, which is a paddle tail. Now, other than that, I like crawl imitation, something with curly tails pretty much. This is just a crawl, and this is a cross here with the elastic. And the reason why I use that is, one, switch the profile. Now besides that, when you rig this up, it's pretty much the same way. You can rig it straight inline like that, which will give you the two legs on a horizontal look. So rig it the same way, push it up like that, and now you can see that you have the little appendages on the bottom that are just gonna wobble. And this has pretty much works with the blade itself, so it won't do any disruption on the blade, and it will just kind of flap just like that. So different look. One other way I like to rig this is actually same way but sideways. So bring it down here, come out the side. Now you can see that it's pretty much sideways like that, so the motion is going to be different, side to side instead of up and down with that. So that's one way to rig those up, with a crawl or kind of something like a twin curly tail grub. And the other two I just want to go over, it's pretty simple, which most of you will have. It's a curly tail. That will just do the same motion in the back of the chatterbait, just curl. And that's something more finesse that a lot of people like to use, or and I don't see a lot of people using it like that around here, but try it out and it actually works pretty good. And something that's super finesse is just a straight tail plastic, which is a fluke. And what it does, it just adds bulk to the profile of the chatterbait, and the tail will just barely kick once you rig it on the actual chatterbait. Now, so those are your trailers there that you have, and you can have more. There's plenty more options out there, but those are just your common four that most people use for, your snake hits, bass, and obviously some people even use them for rockfish. Now, there is a couple types of chatterbaits. There's weedless chatterbaits, which you will just Texas rig on there. And then your regular chatterbaits, which are open. So your regular chatterbaits are more for your open water or areas where there's not a lot of structure and you're just bumping out of that structure. And your weedless will be more towards where there's grass or there's actual, wood structure like that will actually, where you usually will get hung up. So you will actually just run this weedless through there and actually make it pretty much go through the weeds. Now, even though it is weedless, a lot of times what happens is you're gonna have to clean that blade. There will be some grass or some debris that will get onto that blade. and affect the actual motion of that. So we just have to get the grass out of there. But that's what the weedless looks like, and the way you rig this up is pretty much a Texas rig. And if you don't know what a Texas rig is, I will show you. So same way, hold your bait tail down this way facing the actual bait. Run it right through the nose of the bait here. Make sure you're straight in there. Poke it out. So as you can see, I just went a little bit in there, just where the shank is. Pull it out, push it all the way up the shank of the hook here. Flip it like that. And then all you're really gonna do is just pretty much come back right through it. And now it's completely weedless. So that allows you to throw that in the grass and whatnot, and it'll probably get stuck a lot less. But when you do your hook sets, you're gonna have to have a heavier rod, or just actually rip it and set that hook pretty nicely, because now you have to penetrate the plastic and actually go in through the fish's mouth. So with that, you're gonna have to use a little bit heavier gear, or a lot of times you won't actually hook the fish. So those are your two different types of chatterbaits, and the last thing I want to go over is the colors. As always, just match it to the water clarity that you have around this area. Like I've always mentioned on previous things for snakeheads and bass, most of the time I'm only using 2 or 3 different colors, and my favorite ones are going to be black and blue, or just straight black. For your muddy, super dirty conditions out there, that's going to be one of the best colors. Sometimes around black water, I like to use a black and blue when it's actually nice and sunny out. My most, I guess, used color that I use is just a plain white. I like to use that white color just to pretty much kind of like, I'm going to say it's more universal. You can use it in some stain water, clear water. It's more of a semi-natural look. And personally, that's like the color I use the most down in Blackwater or anywhere in the area for snakeheads. They seem to like that white color a lot. And chartreuse, more for also, semi-stain water to some dirty water. This is like my third option out there. Most of the time I'm starting with white if the water's kind of stained, and then if they're not really hitting that, I will go with something like that. And if it's super sunny or murky water, I will go with black and blue, or just straight black chatterbait. Most of the weights, like I said, that I use around here are going to be 1/4 ounce and 3/8, and that's going to cover me for all around anywhere in the area. Also, one little technique before we leave here, and another tip is this chatterbaits, you can reel them straight, play with the speed, meaning you can burn them and they'll come up obviously a lot higher up in the water column. You can burn them and stop them, which will just chatter this bait pretty fast. Once you stop it, it will drop, and as soon as you pick it up, most of those fish will come up and hit it. Or you can jig it, what most people call a yo-yo or jigging, which means you cast it out, you let it drop to the bottom, rip it, let it drop, rip it back up, and that creates a lot of reaction strikes. But you got to be really careful where you're actually throwing it and jigging it, because if there's a lot of structure around, you're just going to get hung up. And at that point, if you know the area has a lot of stumps or anything on the bottom that you can get hung up with, you say weedless one, and that will actually work almost like a rattle trap when you're jigging that up and down. And the cool thing about this stuff, it's the last tip I can give you, you can interchange the skirts. So a lot of places are going to have replacement skirts with different colors and whatnot. So if you do have your favorite color and they don't have the chatterbait on your favorite color, you can always look around for these skirts. And the biggest thing is, most of these are rubber band, so you can slide them out. Or if they're hen tied, you will have to cut it. But if they're hen tied, I would just recommend keeping it that way. But most of them are pretty easy to replace, where you can actually just take your trailer off, slide this back out, and this guy just slides back in there, and you push it all the way up, and now you have a different color chatter bait. Now, you can do that, customize it the way you want it, and a lot of times, honestly, I know this is pretty much about trailers and whatnot, but a lot of times if the fish are super finicky, especially with snakeheads and down in Blackwater, there's a lot of times, or I'm going to say probably like 80% of the time I'm fishing down there and I start throwing the chatterbait, I do not put a trailer on. I just leave it by itself. And a lot of times that's kind of like the ticket, because if you feel that they're short striking, and let's say you start fishing and you put a trailer on there and you're getting a lot of bites, most of the time they're just going to be grabbing that trailer and short striking it. So the way to pretty much fix the problem is take that out. Now you have a short profile, they'll come up and hit that. And it actually gives it a different look, because that will just kind of flutter the actual skirt. So that's one way to run them too, without skirts and or without actual trailers. And sometimes you can actually even remove the skirt and just run the trailer on there, and you have a couple different options there. So pretty much that's it on our chatterbaits here. And like I said, they're a great lure to just kind of search around for fish. If the fish are super active, you'll definitely smoke them with a chatterbait. If the fish are a little finessed, then you're gonna have to kind of make a reaction strike, and you can do that by jigging it. Like I mentioned, like doing the jigging around structure, or just burning it and then letting it stop and try to see if you can create a reaction strike with that. And both of these, well, all these kind of techniques and tips and whatnot work for bass and snakehead. And like I say, just kind of figure out the color and the weights once you get to your spot, and if the rest is pretty much just up to you, and kind of figuring out and covering water in the area that you're fishing. But besides that, great bait, definitely something to have in a tackle box. And that's pretty much it for your chatterbaits and whatnot here. And like I said, any more questions or anything, just shoot us a message or whatnot, and we can answer your questions. And you guys have a good one.